Welcome to the Health Coach Nation podcast. My name is Hailey Rowe, and I'm a sales and marketing coach and LinkedIn lead generation service provider. I work with health, life, and mindset coaches and online service-based business owners to help them get more sales, shift their time to the client-generating activities instead of just the busy work, and overcome that social media overwhelm. Let's get into the show. If you're ready to take on your next paying clients, I have good news. My free 4 Basics of Client Attraction and How to Stand Out class is live at haileyrowe.com/client-attraction. In the class, you're going to learn the top 2 traits I recommend for most coaches and entrepreneurs if they really want to turn this into a career. You're going to learn how you can build demand for your services and stop getting crickets on your posts. You're going to learn the sales roadmap I used to improve my sales conversion rate and help my clients do the same. And you're going to learn so much more. So go to haileyrowe.com/client-attraction and get your copy of the class today. Hey, today I'm here with Stephanie, and she is going to introduce herself and her background, but she has quite an impressive background in the industry of wellness, but in a different way than the conventional way. So, Stephanie, why don't you introduce yourself and we'll go from there.
So I'm Stephanie Dodier. I'm a clinical nutritionist, a certified intuitive eating counselor, and also a reform dieter. I have a PhD in dieting of 25 years of studying, and I quit dieting in about 10 years ago. And I came to the world of wellness and coaching 10 years ago in my adventure of healing myself. And prior to that, I had a 15-year career in the corporate world. So I've got an intense background in business training, and I've got a lot of lived experience in the field of health and nutrition.
Yeah, and you had started your certification company. Tell us more about that and what it does and how you got into that, because it sounds like you got into it from personal experience of just being sick of dieting.
It's 10 years ago when I was introduced to a book. 3 of my clients in a matter of 2 weeks gave me the same book. They're saying, "Oh, I'm reading this book. You got to read this." And the first 2 clients, they left the office and I threw out the book because it was about not dieting. And I was like, I didn't think there was anything else possible. And the third client in that span of 2 weeks gave me that book, Health at Every Size by Dr. Lindo Bacon. I'm like, okay, this is a message. I got to read this. And that propelled me in questioning everything that I was taught in nutrition school and everything that I had been doing. And it gave me an answer as to why I was struggling eating and actually why I went into the field of nutrition. What's interesting is when we look at statistics of students in nutrition, 77% of the students who choose the path of nutrition and health coaching have disordered eating pattern. And that was me, right? Because you have to be obsessed about food and health in order to make it your career. When you think about that, it's pretty evident, right? So that's part of the reason why I went into that field. And I practice with clients for almost exclusively 5 years with women only. And I kept seeing my story in them. So as I went into the journey of healing my eating pattern and behavior, I realized it was much deeper than just about the food. It was a pattern of behavior that were hiding and coping with other things that had happened in my life. So my obsession with food and dieting was hiding the real issue that was behind that I was trying to cope with by controlling food and controlling my body. And in discovering the path of healing myself and working with my clients and finding a methodology, many other professionals, as I was sharing the story on social media, recognized themselves because it's 70% of us that have the same thing that our clients are experiencing. So I started to work with a lot of professionals one-on-one as a client. And then as they were healing their own relationship to food and body, they wanted to take that into their own practice. And that's how my second business was born, the non-diet certification, because other professionals wanted to do the same thing as me, but there was no training out there. There was nothing helping professionals do that. And that's how the non-diet coaching certification was born.
Wow, that is awesome. I mean, it's pretty wild to find out that statistic about
I know.
wellness, right? So when you and I'm curious, you don't have to share, but I'm curious. When you say that you were using food to control things out instead of what you really needed to address, what were some of the things you felt like? Do you feel like we need to address that's not the food?
I would say the primary, what everybody will recognize that they're probably doing themselves, is constant self-judgment and self-criticism. My thoughts in my brain were constantly picking on myself about everything. The amount of work I did, the quality of work I did, my relationship, my house, everything. And that caused a lot of suffering emotionally. So a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, a lot of resentment. And I didn't know how to process this emotion. So I was diagnosed with anxiety disorder. I was diagnosed prior to that with depression. But it was emotion that I was creating because I was in a constant state of self-criticism. There was also a lot of traumatic experience in my past. And I want to caution people, when we think of trauma, we think of violence or sexual abuse. But there's also other events that may have happened to you that, if not processed, will keep coming back for you. So simple thing as bullying in school, right? We can think about parenting style. Like for me, I was raised in a very military style family that discarded all the emotion, which made me great. Like it gave me a lot of emotional resilience and work habit, but it did not teach me how to process my emotion. And I carried that my whole life. So things that have happened in the past that have not been healed and processed, we carry forward. And that is what we tried to control. I was trying to control my emotion unknowingly with food and with dieting and controlling my weight because I believed that I wasn't good enough.
Yeah, wow. I think the whole concept of not being good enough or not feeling good enough is at the root of a lot of our challenges. We try to over control or we try to, do a lot of things. So that's a very interesting perspective. And what I would love to know as well, because you are a businesswoman and you've been very successful with all that you've done. You said you used to work in corporate. So tell me a little bit about what were some of the things that corporate prepared you for with entrepreneurship versus maybe some shifts or mindset things that you had to address when you became an entrepreneur that you didn't have to deal with in corporate?
I would say the number one thing that corporate taught me is structure, organization, structure, planning, thinking processes. Back in the days, we had something called the Six Sigmas. Like older folk or people who've been in the corporate world would recognize that. It was a training structure for you to find the problem within your business and create a solution that would eliminate that problem going forward. So creating a standard operating procedure. So coming to the world of entrepreneurship from the business world, because there's a difference between the two. And I constantly have to teach about that. When you are in the corporate world, you are in a business world where you work for someone else, typically in a very structured environment, and you fit the mold. When you come to entrepreneurship, you are the business. And specifically as coaches, I like to refer to the water bottle, right? We don't sell water bottle. We sell ourselves. We become the product and the CEO of the business. For me, the transition was easy, in which I knew how to structure my business, how to hire people, how to plan for their work and organize their work. But what I wasn't ready for is me being the product. Me being the product on social media and selling myself. But as a coach, our brain, our emotions are the centric product that people are buying. They're buying our story on social media, but when they come in our coaching session, the coaching relies on our brain and our emotions. So really shifting from doing things on the list to do to taking care of my product, which was me.
That is so true. Yeah, we sometimes can find it. I think it's a lot of people find it hard to not take things personally when they are a big part of their product and they are a personal brand. So what were some ways you built up your confidence or didn't maybe take things personally? Is there any tips or advice you have when it comes to that?
I want to say one word: mindset. So your way of thinking about your product, which is you, about your ability as a coach, about your business, the way you think about money, the way you think about marketing yourself, the way you think about selling yourself, like all your thoughts, your quote unquote mindset about your business and your ability to manage these thoughts. Too often when we come to the entrepreneurship world, we think, just give me a list of things to do. Just give me step 1 to step 10, and I'm just going to execute, because that's what we do when we work for someone else. We execute, right? When we come to the world of entrepreneurship, and specifically as a coach, it's about how we think. The steps are easy. Like I can give you the step 1 to 5, but it's about how you're going to show up to each step. So the way you think, the way you process your emotions. If we come back to the example of not taking things personally, the way to not take things personally is to change your thoughts about your coaching, to change, really be really clear about who's responsible for the result in the coaching session. Your client is responsible for creating the result, following your coaching process, your program. You're responsible for coming to the coaching session with a coaching process in your head, your brain clear, your emotion clear, so you can show up 100%. So clearly understanding the responsibility between you and your client, and then redirecting your thoughts to what you're responsible for, and holding yourself accountable and responsible to what's yours and what is your client. So it's 100% mindset. No, not true. 98% mindset.
Nice. And what's the other 2%?
Structure, the steps.
Yeah.
The step 1 to 5.
Love it. Okay. So I agree with you that when we're clear and we're not having mental drama, we're able to show up so much more for our clients, get them better results. And I think a lot of people are like, but I'm a perfectionist and I'm like overthinking every step and I'm all up in my head. And they think that that's helping the client better. And it's just not. When you're waiting and being a perfectionist and, all of that, trying to control every single thing, you can't show up from that full open space for your client. And I think also it's really interesting how that ties into what you were saying about dieting. Like when you're focused on dieting all the time and all up in your head about your body criticism and stuff, it's hard to show up fully to life because you're just like preoccupied with that all the time. So what would you say are some ways we start to let go of that? Because that can be really scary for people to let go of things they think are part of their character, like perfectionism. Like they just think that's just how I am, or these things that we do on repeat that we're so used to that letting it go is almost scary. So any advice about that?
So to answer that question, I'm going to bring us into the coaching model that we use. Okay, so we use cognitive behavioral coaching. So the first question I would have to all of you listening is, do you have a coaching structure or model? Like, do you know how to truly coach people's thoughts and how to process their emotion? And by the way, that's not therapy. That's coaching. Therapy is a whole other world. Do you have a framework you coach from? And likely, if you are up into your own perfectionism and you're believing that that's a character trait, you're probably not having a coaching framework. Because if you have a coaching framework, you will know that perfectionism is just an outcome of how you think about yourself. So, coaching behavioral model says your thought creates your feeling creates your action, how you show up into the world, and that creates a result that you have in your life. So when your perfectionism, for an example, that's your behavior into the world as a result of you feeling, typically for women, anxious, not good enough, and doubtful, not confident. Because they're thinking, I don't know if I'm good enough for this. I don't know if I can transform my client. I don't know if I'm meant to do business. I'm not making enough money. These thoughts create the anxiety and the self-doubt that then makes you want to control how you're showing up so you can be good enough. So the first step is understanding what's happening. So what I call what is. So the first step of cognitive behavioral coaching is understanding how people show up the way they do. So why do I show up in perfectionism? How do I create this? Which then leads me to step 2, which is self-responsibility. Instead of thinking, well, it's just the way I am, there's nothing I can do. It's like, no. I'm showing up as perfectionism and it's clearly not working for me or my client. What can I do? Do I want to change? That's the other piece that's important, is self-consent. Do I want to change? And then from there, you look at the thoughts that creates the anxiety and creates the perfectionism, and you change them. And that's why when I come back to business, the way we think about business that creates the doubt and the need to control everything, these thoughts, that's what we need to change in order to get result in our business.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I coach from the same kind of framework.
Model.
Yeah, definitely. So when it comes to changing our thoughts, sometimes people, and this is why you're saying it's so important to like process emotions and know how to do that. Because it's one thing to just say, well, okay, I'm just going to stop being a perfectionist and I'm awesome. And you don't really believe that. So you kind of
bullshit thoughts.
Yeah, you kind of have to ease your way towards that, and find a feeling you can really resonate with to get there. So, has there been anything that's helped you transition from any of your mindset blocks that you want to share?
So, part of the cognitive behavioral coaching model recognize that you can't just change a thought like this. You have to understand where the thought comes from and how you learn that thought. So how did you learn? So we'll link dieting and business, for an example. Many self-identified women have grown up in what we call diet culture, the system of belief that women are their beauty, their body size, and that we need to look a certain way, and we're never enough of that way. Like, no matter how thin you are, you're never thin enough. No matter how much makeup you put on, you're never good enough. And that's why we have all the aesthetic surgeries and the treatments for appearance that we have, is because it's never enough. So innately in us, we've grown up to believe that we're never enough. So we come to the business world and we carry that way of thinking. Oh, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough of a coach. I don't know how to make money. I don't know how to sell. I'm not good enough at my marketing. I don't make enough conversion. I'm not good. Everywhere we go, it's like a pair of glasses we wear. I'm not enough. The first part of releasing that thought is understanding that that thought is not yours. It's diet culture. It's the way your family raised you, the way your mom related to herself, and the way she was criticizing herself. You have to understand where it comes from, that it's not yours. And the second step that's most often forgotten in the world of coaching is consent. Do I want to stop thinking I'm not good enough? It seems obvious, right? But the power sits in you or your client asking themselves that question for a period of time and really making a choice to say, no, I don't want to think that anymore. Like, every fiber of me wants to change. And then you go into what I call the treatment plan, or the the detox or the cleanse, and your coach has a step-by-step process to believe something else. So one of the tools that I use that my teacher taught me is a thought ladder. And that's recognized when you go to the world of emotion and nervous system, there's a concept called titration, where once you want to normalize what was formerly a trauma or fear, it's not by avoiding it that you're going to heal it. It's by reintroducing little by little, and you creating safety for the exposure to what was once a fear or something you didn't believe. So in the world of thoughts, it's the same thing. You kind of have to sell your brain on the new belief. I am innately worthy. I am born good enough. You have to start with gradually learning to believe that. So a great way of laddering that thought could be, it's possible for women like me to feel good enough. That was, for me, how I worked for my body image. So I'm a fat woman living a very public life in a society that says that being fat is terrible and I should go hide. I had to train my brain to believe that it was possible for a woman that looks like me to be a public figure and to coach on a public platform other women. So it's possible for women like me. I'm learning to become a fat woman who feels confident. And I ladder it up. It took probably a year or two for me to believe that I am confident in my now body. So that would be my advice. Gradually learning to believe this new thought.
Wow. Yes, I totally agree. I think one of the things I've done with clients who are like, oh, I'm terrible at tech. I'm learning how to use tech in my business. I'm able to learn new skills, like all the little things. And I love how you call it a thought ladder. I don't know what I think I called it a bridge thought, but I think it's kind of similar where it's like,
same thing.
Get on the road towards something.
You're really good at mindset.
Oh, thank you. I love mindset. I love this kind of stuff. So, anyways, so where can people connect with you, learn more about you? Because this is really helpful. And I think you have so much to give on your podcast and your Instagram and all that good stuff. So let's share where people can find you.
Especially if we're looking at an audience of health professional, I would say that the very first place to jump over is on my professional podcast called Undiet Your Coaching, where we talk about this approach of mindset, cognitive behavioral modeling, both from a health, nutrition, habit building, health promoting habit perspective, and also how to apply that to business and how to do your own personal work. So Undiet Your Coaching is a podcast. And then you can also find me, obviously, on my website, www.stephaniedodier.com. And I have another podcast that's called Going Beyond the Food. And this is 370 episodes. It's been going on for, 7 years. And that's where I teach to the regular population like women. So if you are a professional who wants to do their own work with food and health and body image, Going Beyond the Food podcast is your number one resource with a ton of content for free.
Amazing. Yes. And I'm very excited to be a part of your podcast soon. And we'll put the links with the show notes when this turns into a podcast at HaileyRowe.com. And I'll put them in the LinkedIn comments later today. And thanks again for coming. And I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Ellie.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to this podcast. And if it's really helpful for you, I'd really appreciate if you share it and or leave a written podcast review. This tells the podcast sites that our show is useful and it will be promoted to more people that way. Thanks again.